We had 5 great panelists covering all issues. Energy, from gas and power markets, to regulatory developments, to hydrocarbons, to geopolitics of hydrocarbons. There is, of course, the avidly awaited coffee break now, but I insist, before I release you for coffee, to have at least 2 questions from the audience. I mean, we had so, please.
Shall I just use my loud voice?
You have indeed a loud voice, sir.
Okay, I'm one of the few politicians in here. I'm the representative of the United States Republican Party in Greece. And I see a lot of business in it. I don't understand how these complex projects can ever take part unless...
Yeah, could you please kindly repeat your question?
Yeah, my question is, what are the energy companies going to do to pressure governments to sign treaties? I'm referring especially to Greece and Israel, and with the weak party and the indecisive party being Greece, in order to secure the profits for all your companies. We're all for it. But you also have to pressure the governments involved. We can't do everything.
So this
the question is, what are the questions for Mr. Gontikas?
Yeah.
Loved your speech. Yeah. But in order for all this thing to happen, 2 countries must form a defense alignment. That's Israel and Greece. And I'm not seeing that happen.
Okay.
I'd love it, but I'm not seeing
Mr.
it.
Gontikas and perhaps Mr. Shastri could answer this question.
Hello? Okay, so just for the record, the question is, what do we plan to do to...
Not just you, all of you.
Yeah, all the companies, let's say, to motivate our governments to secure, let's say, those projects. Am I... Sorry?
Drag them.
Yes. I'm sure you know there's representatives of at least the Greek government in the room to which we have presented the projects. Let's discuss about the projects that we want to take place in Greece. And I'm discussing, for example, the underground gas storage facility. So I know for a fact that there is a huge effort in the making of expediting everything that is necessary for that. So the first thing we need to do is expedite all the processes. The second thing is there has to be an environment of quote-unquote security, and security in terms of legislation, continuation of administration, calmness in the area, and calmness can be political or otherwise. You can have your choice of that. So stability is a key word for those. And that's the way you attract, at least as far as we've seen, partners, other companies, other people interested. As for other companies present here today, I can't speak for them, but for us, these are essential things. We have worked with our government very closely on this and other issues, and we are working very hard today with them. The main issue for me is that we need to align completely the objectives, and that's what we need to do here. And align the objectives, I mean, there is definitely, we have a commercial interest, but there are other objectives, and I'm discussing the UGS project because this is the example. And these objectives are flexibility, stability of the market, and security of supply, for instance. So we need to make sure that this is understood, and we need to make sure that everything is done to promote that. I need to stop here before I get into waters that don't belong to privateers. We are a private company, and I think probably a member of the government should extend the answer further to this. But this is what we're prepared to do today, to enhance motivation of governments and to enhance the possibility of those critical infrastructure projects being constructed and connected. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you.
Do you wish to add something, Mr. Shastri?
Not really. Okay. I think except for the fact that I've yet to really come across real cases where representations made by companies for projects which have always made sense. ever been refused by governments on grounds of sheer political stubbornness. Usually governments end up finding a way out. Takes long, sometimes it's complicated, but
so companies need to be bold.
I think companies are doing what they should be doing, and what they can do. There are limitations beyond which companies cannot make that point sufficiently enough, and I think that's where, and you know, I think there is a limit up to which they can go, and beyond which I think it is better to kind of, you know, lay things off a little bit to see where things land. Slightly risky, but you know, easy for me to say, but that's what my thought is.
Is there any second question from the audience? If not, may I ask one brief question to Mrs. Karakatsani and perhaps to Dr. Goudis? You mentioned in your presentation that our electricity mix at the moment, the production is 23% based on renewables, 30% by natural gas. Lignite has retreated to 21% and 19% imports. But of course, taking into mind that imports are coming from the northern border where our northern neighbors produce based on lignite, some of this is of course lignite, if not all, a big percentage. So 2 points. First of all, maybe we should be a bit more modest on how much we have decarbonized, because we have not reduced lignite only to 21%. We have displaced Greek lignite with Serbian or Bosnian lignite, perhaps. The second is, what will happen, or what the Greek government, is the Greek government prepared in case EU, or the European Commission, which now discusses the imposition of a carbon tax from non-EU countries, what will happen in that case? Because of course the imports will become more expensive from our lignite-produced non-EU neighbors who will have to face a carbon tax. And then what happens? Does this give a life extension to the PPC's lignite power plants, or gives opportunities for more gas, or the wholesale prices will spike?
Thank you very much for the question. It is actually very relevant and topical. If I recall... Sorry, okay. Thank you very much for the question. It is very relevant and topical. If I recall correctly, in July, the imports to Greece coming from countries that are subject to ETS, that is Bulgaria and Italy, were of the order of 63%, and the rest, 37%, came from Turkey, North Macedonia, and Albania. So it's certainly a non-negligible fraction. I have the pleasure to be taking part at the Board of Regulators of the Energy Community, and there this issue of an EU proposal to the 6 Western Balkan countries introducing a carbon tax has been relevant and discussed, although there is no clear framework or no specific actually implementation roadmap for such a measure. It's the common termed issue and phenomenon of carbon leakage that needs to be addressed by the EU policy. It is certainly an issue. At the moment, what we do at the Regulatory Board of the Energy Community is try to analyze such an impact for production in these countries, but also for consumers. And as I showed, in these countries, consumers unfortunately pay much more for coal subsidies than renewable levies, whereas a carbon tax would help these countries to actually move towards renewables. In any case, it is certainly necessary. When Serbia, for instance, gets into the EU, there is no opt-out mechanism, in the same manner that Bulgaria and Romania introduced ETS pricing from the very first day, that was 1st of January 2007, if I recall correctly. The same will happen with the Balkan countries, and this uniform approach to ETS will help cross-border trading and emissions to be addressed in a more fairly and equal basis. Thank you.
Yeah, a few words also. I think, well, the issue of carbon leakage, as it's commonly known, is 100% political and regulatory, since by definition, if you impose a tax on one party and then you cannot impose it on other parties, then the playing field is not level. So obviously the solution will need, this has been going on for quite a few years in Europe in general, and there is no other way around it. I mean, the market for CO2 emission rights itself is a special market. It's not driven entirely by demand and supply, it's also driven by regulation. When you have backloading or when you have decisions made on the quantity of the CO2 rights, then this represents directly the will of the governments and the regulators to enforce the agenda for renewable generation. So by definition, you need some measures that are regulatory. What Nectaria said is the obvious way out. Obviously, when new countries join, the problem goes away. Until it goes away, you can negotiate, but then it will boil down to how much your power, how able you are to convince the other countries that are not yet in the EU to let go of the really big advantage they gain through this CO2 rights difference.
Okay, so in conclusion, I ask you all to show the appreciation to our 5 panelists by the usual way, and it's coffee time.